All right. Good evening. Good evening. I am Jeffrey Collins, Professor of Art History and Material Culture at Bard Graduate Center. And on behalf of my faculty colleagues, I am delighted to welcome you to this 22nd year, and believe it or not, the 55th convocation of the Françoise and Georges Selz Endowed Lectures in 18th and 19th century French decorative arts, design, and culture. Congratulations to those of you who had a seat by registering early, since this event filled up fast. And it's a reminder to do the same for our next Selz lecture on the 22nd of April, when Jessica Dandona from Minneapolis College of Art and Design will speak on the visual and material culture of medicine in late 19th century France, particularly anatomical models with flaps. So that will be a first. Watch this space and stay tuned. Tonight we are joined by two representatives of the World Monuments Fund to learn about the restoration and reinstallation of an architectural jewel that is indeed a monument both to the creativity and taste of 18th century France and to the vision and commitment of its 21st century saviors. The word monument comes from the Latin verb monere, meaning to remind or to warn or to instruct. Today, we tend to associate it with custom-built memorials like the Washington Monument in DC. But over the centuries, the term has been applied to anything that taught or testified about the past or preserved a memory of the present, from written texts and inscriptions to two-dimensional images, and from pocket-sized artifacts like coins and medals to monumental buildings. Indeed, according to the Roman writer Cicero, the temple of Juno Moneta on the Capitoline Hill in Rome, which gave its name to the adjoining mint and even to our word money, commemorated the goddess's role in protecting the city and its occupants, not least when the honking of her sacred geese alerted the sleeping Romans to the invading Gauls who were making a nighttime attack in 390 BC. The dogs failed to do that and were crucified as punishment. The poet Livius Andronicus even related the goddess Moneta with Mnemosyne, the mother of the muses and the patron goddess of memory, reflecting the belief that the priests of Juno Moneta maintained an unimpeachable record of historical events. All these associations, protection, preservation, money, memory, reflect the mission of the World Monuments Fund, dedicated to safeguarding and transmitting humanity's irreplaceable cultural heritage. To tell us more about that work are Bénédicte de Montlaur, the WMF's president and CEO since 2019. Trained in sociology, Arabic, and public affairs, de Montlaur spent 2 decades with the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Syria, Paris, and the US. A reminder that historic preservation requires not just moneta, but a large dose of diplomacy. It also requires endurance, a quality Bénédicte exemplifies by competing in the New York City Marathon. Did you run? Did you run Sunday or last year? Good enough for us. Her colleague Cinzia Pasquali represents the technical side of the equation, a conservator trained at the Istituto Centrale per il Restauro in Rome and the Université de Paris. Pasquali has worked on paintings by Renaissance masters including Leonardo and Bronzino, as well as landmark decorative programs at the Louvre, Versailles, and the Château de Chantilly. She led the team dedicated to bringing historic paintings, paneling, stucco, and wood carving from Paris's Chancellerie d'Orléans out of deep storage and back to the light at the Hôtel de Rouen-Soubise. That is the project that you can read about in this beautiful book by Faton, and that we're going to hear about tonight. Please join me in welcoming Bénédicte de Montlaur and Cinzia Pasquali to BGC and the Selz
Thank you so much for this warm introduction. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for introducing what monuments mean. I was so surprised when I joined the World Monuments Fund and realized that for many Americans, a monument is a statue or a memorial, whereas in French, indeed, it has a larger meaning. And so I keep saying people that in fact we only restored, I think, 2 statues over the 700 monuments we've restored. So thank you so much to the Bard Graduate Center for inviting us for this lecture. It's a true pleasure, and I feel we are among like-minded people. I was delighted to see the Sèvres exhibition next door, and very soon it will be Viollet-le-Duc. and so many friendly faces here. We're going to talk today about a fascinating story. It is a saga of the French decorative arts, a saga of heritage consciousness in Paris, and a saga for World Monuments Fund. So here is just an appetizer. You're seeing a photography of the Chancellerie d'Orléans is in its current state. But to arrive at that state, I'm going to take you and Cinzia to a long detour. This is what you can see now in the Marais. So first, a few words about World Monuments Fund. So World Monuments Fund is a leading independent organization dedicated to restore heritage around the world. We've been active. We are celebrating our 60th anniversary. Just last week, we had our gala at the Temple of Dandur celebrating this anniversary. We are headquartered in New York, despite my huge French accent. I live here, and we have 8 offices around the world. And over those 60 years, we've restored 700 sites in 112 countries. So here you can see the map of where we are. So different affiliate offices in Peru, in India, France, UK, Spain, and Portugal. An office in Cambodia, which is our most well-known project, I would say, our flagship project. And we just opened an office in China as well, and developing in Japan, Mexico, and Brazil at the moment. And here you see a map of our current project. It just gives you, I won't go through this list. We can talk more about what we do, but just give you an idea of the diversity of our projects. So 44 active projects and 10 programs in 34 countries. And our projects are, of course, like physical conservation, brick and mortar, and we are trying to develop model projects that can inspire other heritage manager about what can be done about the main threats to heritage. So, of course, the passage of time, here you see a picture of Cambodia, but also disappearance of skill, and more recently, new threats to heritage like climate change, over tourism, conflict, urbanization. So those are all topics that we address through our projects, trying to develop solutions that are replicable. Let me go to France now. So WMF was established in France in 1989, and then we had a little hiatus, and we reopened a few years after I joined, bizarrely, in 2023. I'm just saying that, but it's not at all linked to me. Like so many of our members really wanted us to reopen in France, and it has impacted also this project at the Chancellerie d'Orléans. We have a long history of involvement in France. We've led more than 30 projects at 21 sites. And now we have an extremely dynamic office. So if you go to Paris, don't hesitate to contact us. Our dynamic executive director, Mathilde Auger in France, will be happy to take you around our active projects at the moment. So you have the church of Saint-Eustache, which is one of the largest churches in Paris. It's this amazing Les Halles neighborhood that is really experiencing a revival at the moment. There we are restoring several chapels, working on interpretation. We are working at Potager du Roi, which is a kitchen garden of Versailles, where we've been involved for a long time. At the beginning, thanks to Hubert de Givenchy, who was president of the WMF in France, and Bunny Mellon, who was his close friend, and started the first project at Potager du Roi. And since then, we've expanded it and it became the center of excellence of a program we are developing on adaptation of historic gardens to climate change. And the most recent project is the Chapelle de la Sorbonne. It's an amazing story. It's like one of the most well-known places in Paris. When you are on the Place de la Sorbonne, you see this dome. It is the logo of La Sorbonne, and it's been closed more or less for 50 years to the public. You have some paintings by Philippe de Champaigne. You have the tomb of Cardinal de Richelieu. And so we just signed the agreement a few weeks ago to start the restoration. And the goal, of course, is to reopen this amazing place to the public. Now I'm getting closer to the topic of today. So one of the milestone program of our Monuments Fund in France has been our program on historic interiors. It was mainly 18th century interior, but because we've included here on the picture on the left the Opéra Comique, which is a 19th century interior, so that's the exception on these pictures. But otherwise, we worked at la Bibliothèque Nationale, le Salon de Musique, au Château de Chantilly, at Saint-Sulpice extraordinary sacristy. That, in fact, I was there just a few weeks ago and peeked into the sacristy, and you can notice that WMF was very bad at signage because there is no sign about our restoration. But apart from that, it's an extraordinary place, and I highly encourage you to go there because beautiful and always open. The others, same for Chantilly, l'Opéra Comique and la Bibliothèque de l'Arsenal, that we can help you access those extraordinary places. So, but that brings me to the Chancellerie d'Orléans. That was really, I would say, the pinnacle, the most important project, the masterpiece of 18th century interiors that WMF helped restore since the year 2000. So just here to situate you a little bit. So here is where this Chancellerie d'Orléans that we're going to talk about was, and here is where it is today. It's more or less 20 minutes walking distance. So it's all in the center of Paris. Here it's around the Palais Royal, and here it's the heart of the Marais, le quadrilatère des Archives. So here you have the original building, La Chancellerie d'Orléans, that was built for the Duke d'Orléans, was the nephew of Louis XIV, and so very powerful. He became the regent when Louis XV was too young to reign. And it was first built by, at the very beginning of the 18th century, by Germain Beaufranc, who was one of the main architects of that time. And it was built first for the précepteur, so the private teacher of le Duc d'Orléans. And then he finally asked his former teacher to move away, and he gave it to his mistress, and Mademoiselle de Cléry, who soon gave him a son. But then again, she fell out of favor. So that's why I'm telling you, it's a saga from day one, this place. So then she fell out of favor, and this became the property of Le Comte de Voyer d'Argenson, who decided that he really wanted to take this place and to redesign it to the best of the design and decorative art of that time. So that was around in the 1760s. And so he tasked somebody called Charles de Bailly, who was the architect, to really conceive this project. And what's extraordinary about it is that Charles de Bailly was coming back from Rome, so he was very influenced by Roman palaces, and he was friendly with so many great artists of that time that he gathered an extraordinary team. So Pajou, Fragonard, but then they will destroy the Fragonard because they didn't like it. And I'm not joking. Duramo, Gouttière. He assembled this whole team of artists to work on these interiors. And it was the first time you had like a sort of total artwork, exterior, interior, and all those artists working together. And that's why like these interiors became so famous. So here you have a black and white picture of the place where it was. So what happened is that after the revolution, it started being rented. Like at one point, it was a piano factory, and at the beginning of the 20th century, there was an owner who decided to rent the whole building to several tenants, but while having some precision that people should respect the heritage. At that time, you had a very powerful neighbor, so around the Palais Royal, which was la Banque de France. And la Banque de France felt, they were at l'Hôtel de la Vrière, and they felt they really needed to expand. So that's not really good to have the Banque de France next to you who wants to expand. On top of it, you had like la Mairie de Paris, so Paris municipality, wanted to redesign the way you could circulate in Paris, and so they wanted to open a new street. So La Baronne Thénard, who was the owner and a woman of character, decided to ask for landmark. And that's why I'm telling you that that's the story of that place is also the story of heritage consciousness emerging in Paris, because Les Beaux-Arts and this idea of landmarking had just emerged like a few, like at the end of the 19th century. So she got the place landmarked to oppose the plans of the municipality of Paris and the plans of the Banque de France. And then you had 10 years of fight. Finally, they won in 1923. But what happened? So they decommissioned this place, but the agreement was that the whole place had to be dismantled and put into boxes. So maybe then we have the picture of the boxes. No, so that you have the plan. It's another interesting thing. I will just comment on that before coming back to my story. So you see, it's a quite small place. Like we talk a lot about it, but it's not that big because it was initially created for a single man. So it didn't need like many rooms, etc. What's interesting about that, and just remember this, is that you'll see now it's reinstalled into another Hotel Particulier, which the miracle of that story is that it had almost the same dimensions, the same light, the same everything, except that the disposition, so the organization of the room is not the same. That's one of the big differences. Okay, so here is the decor. So when I was telling you, pinnacle of that time, most amazing decor, it became extremely famous and participated in the fame of French decorative art, because then Charles de Vailly started doing other projects inspired by this one elsewhere in Europe. And that's it. So the agreement in 1923 was that this place could be, the whole Hotel Particulier could be destroyed to allow the Banque de France to expand, on the condition that all the pieces were going to be preserved and put in boxes. So here you find the famous boxes. So, but in fact, it was pretty well done, meaning like now it looks a bit horrifying. I agree with you. But in fact, it was pretty well preserved. And plus, everything was very well documented. And then it became what we call in French l'Arlésienne du patrimoine français. So the, like, French speakers are laughing, but like the big like mystery of French heritage, because in 1923 they put those in boxes and then nobody could see them anymore for almost 100 years. But the thing is that so many interiors of the 18th century had disappeared as well, but this was the most famous one. This was the most extraordinary one, and also there was this commitment to reestablish them. So what's incredible is that first the Banque de France, like the architects of the Banque de France, had different plans to build a new building and to reinstall La Chancellerie d'Orléans, but they never worked. Then other people in Paris, you had a lot of people having many ideas. So there was an idea to put it at Saint-Cloud, to put it au Musée Carnavalet, so au Louvre. So many ideas emerged, but nothing worked. And so it was really the sleeping beauty of French heritage for, it's true, like for 100 years. Then WMF appears. So at that time, we had a director called Bertrand Duvigneau, and with his team, they had a great idea. They found the genius idea, and the idea was that there was another Hotel Particulier in the Marais that had almost the same dimension. And not only that, the thing is that it's kind of incredible because it has almost the same dimension. C'est l'Hôtel de Rouen, so another very powerful family in France. But this townhouse was stripped of its decor. So it was a building without the decor because it had become, after the revolution, the French national print. So they had to strip all the decor. And so you had a building without its decor, almost the same dimension. And on the other side, you had decors without a building. And so you could mix those two together and make the project happen. So what we did at that time to convince people to do this was to create a model that was then shown to La Banque de France. So La Banque de France had a commitment to rebuild it. So we brought a lot of financing, and I think this is very often the role WMF plays, is that we have the initial idea, and when everybody's stuck because of French administrative heaviness, then we brought money and an idea. And this is what started the process again. So this was a partnership between World Monuments Fund, La Banque de France, and the French Ministry of Culture. That started in the 2000. And I think it's also interesting when I was talking before about the history of heritage consciousness in France, the fact that it's a civil society organization like us and a public private partnership that allowed this place to reemerge and be restored. So here is a picture of l'Hôtel de Rouen. For now, it's still inaccessible to the public because you have it's here on the first floor that you find La Chancellerie d'Orléans today. But on top of it, you still have some other decors, extraordinary decors from the 18th century, like another Cingerie, like the one we restored at Chantilly that is going to be restored too. And the project, as part of this whole restoration effort, is to open what is called like le quadrilatère, the square of the archives that is right in the center of the Marais, to the public. For now, you can visit l'Hôtel de Soubise, which is also an extraordinary example of rocaille decor. But this, for now, is not accessible. If you want to visit it, you can contact us. But in the next few years, they are going to open a whole street, and the public will be able to access those extraordinary space. It's quite incredible to know that in such a valuable real estate at the heart of Paris, you have still half of the French National Archives, paper archives, that are being preserved. Okay, so it was a gigantic effort, and Cinzia is going to talk more about it. But everything had to be taken out of the boxes, studied, restored, and then reinstalled. And it was a jigsaw puzzle first, trying to fit everything together. What was extraordinary again is that l'Hôtel de Rouen had almost the same dimensions. There were some differences, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that with Cinzia, but for example, they had to dig the floor. So you have some stairs, like a few stairs, because it was not high enough for the decor. But apart from that, it was very, very similar, which is a miracle. And here you find like the state today. Just a comment on that, because I know Cinzia is not going to comment on it. There was such an effort from the Ministry of Culture and World Monuments Fund and the archive that, for example, we found on the market those chairs that were created by Charles de Vailly. So he was not only the architect, but he created some furniture pieces, like those two chairs that were found at Christie's or Sotheby's, I don't remember. We recreated the material. So we had a description of the colors of the material, and then we worked with Presles et Lyon to recreate this beautiful fabric. So if you go to Paris, you can also, what's I think also kind of interesting about heritage preservation today in France is that you can go to l'Hôtel de la Marine that is on the Place de la Concorde, and it's a completely different idea of how you present historic interiors to the public. The big difference, like all the specialists will tell you, is that at l'Hôtel de la Marine, there was no remains, and it was a little bit of a patchwork of other interiors that were put together and created a period room. But they really were inspired by the American museums. In fact, at l'Hôtel de la Marine, creating period room, you have oysters, have open, like to give an idea that people were living there. Chancellerie d'Orléans is much more a purist version of restoration. Everything is original. And you just have a few pieces of furniture that have been added. So the chairs we saw before, they were original chairs that were conceived for the Chancellerie. And this is the only piece that was not original, and that's a bed, because that was a bedroom. So the French national furniture, le mobilier national, decided to lend. I mean, I think they bought this bed and restored it because it was from the same period, and just to evoke the idea of a bedroom. So now I will give the floor to Cinzia Pasquali, who is next. So she doesn't. I will be precise, even though I would love for Cinzia to work in the team. But in fact, she's worked on many of our projects. But she has her own company called Arcane, and she's really one of the best restorers in France. She was trained as we said, at the Istituto Centrale per il Restauro in Rome. She holds a master degree in conservation restoration from l'Université Paris 3, and she has led major restoration projects in Italy and France, including those paintings that are very famous. Also, one day, if somebody touches La Joconde, it will be Cinzia. No, yeah, so I think so. But she also worked at La Galerie des Glaces, the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. But much more important recently, on this day, she worked at the Galerie d'Apollon, and this is a window where the thieves entered. But she was not in charge of security. So it's my delight to welcome her here to the podium.
Buonasera a tutti, prima di tutto grazie di questa bella presentazione e grazie anche al Bard Graduate Center di avermi invitato qui e il Word. Io purtroppo non parlo un inglese molto fluido, per cui ho una Angela che mi aiuterà a tradurre.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you for this beautiful presentation. I thank the Bard Graduate Center and the World Monuments Fund for having me here this evening. I don't speak English fluently, so I will be assisted by my interpreter.
Devo dire che in effetti ho fatto molte cose nella mia vita, molti restauri, alcuni molto complessi, ma senza dubbio la Chancellerie d'Orléans è stato quello più lungo e più complesso. È durato circa 10 anni e più di 100 persone ne hanno preso parte.
I have to say, I have done a lot of restoration works that were very complex throughout my career, but the Chancellerie d'Orléans was a true challenge. It was very long and complex, taking over 10 years to complete with over 100 craftsmen.
E bisogna anche dire che se non ci fosse stato il World Monument Fund, che ha, diciamo, promosso questo progetto, probabilmente la Chancellerie d'Orléans sarebbe rimasta un'arlésienne, non sarebbe mai stata rimontata senza l'apporto del World, perché sono stati i primi a fare questo progetto e soprattutto economicamente a sostenerlo.
And I must say, it is thanks to the World Monuments Fund that the Orléans, the Chancellerie d'Orléans, was promoted and completed. And in fact, I could dare say that the reassembly would have never happened if it weren't for the World Monuments Fund in the first place supporting this.
Ora vi presenterò alcune cose che abbiamo fatto in maniera molto sintetica perché appunto 10 anni sono difficili da riassumere in 20 minuti, ma ci proveremo.
So now, very concisely, I will tell you a little bit about the work that we've carried out. It's very hard, though, to say in brief and summarize what we've done in 10 years' time, but I'll try.
Ho voluto cominciare con questa frase che è di Nicolas Wacker, che è un mercante artista del XIX secolo, che parla della materia e la materia quanto sia importante per veicolare un'opera d'arte. E diciamo che il restauratore è quell'anello della catena di preservazione del patrimonio che opera fattualmente su questa materia e attraverso questa materia conserva le opere d'arte.
I'd like to open with a phrase by an artist called Zwacker. He was a great artist in the 19th century, and he talked about the importance of the material that is used for each work of art. And he says that the restorer is the element, the linkage between the matter and the piece of art or the work of art that is very important because it is the link between matter and art, and it also is a way through the restorer to preserve this work of art.
La prima operazione quindi è stata di scoprire e di aprire tutte le casse che avete visto dove gli oggetti erano conservati insieme alla paglia in un hangar vicino a Parigi della Banca di Francia, tirare fuori tutti questi pezzi. I più grandi erano fuori dalle casse, erano stati appoggiati così e alcuni soffitti, come questo che vedete nella foto, erano stati rimontati in maniera sommaria.
The first part of our operations was to open all of the crates and see what was inside of the hay. These crates were held at a hangar near Paris. So we looked at all the pieces. The bigger pieces were actually outside of crates. As you can see, this ceiling that we found was actually fastened in a haphazard way.
Tantissimi pezzi, centinaia di pezzi, sono stati catalogati e imballati in maniera quasi maniacale. Questo ha permesso in effetti di ritrovare tutti i pezzi originali, anche diciamo di cornici non importanti, delle 3 stanze che abbiamo ricostruito.
We found many pieces, hundreds of pieces that were cataloged and packaged very meticulously, which allowed us to find all of the pieces, even frames of lesser importance for 2 or 3 rooms.
Un deposito è stato costruito apposta di 5.000 metri quadri per permettere di tirare fuori tutti questi pezzi, tanti pezzi, e la paura era assolutamente di perderne qualcuno o che qualcuno li spostasse e che poi non si ritrovasse più la provenienza da quale cassa provenissero.
So we created a deposit that was about 5,000 square meters large to put all the pieces in. But the major concern was that we would lose the pieces or move them in such a way we would not know where they came from originally, which crate they originally came from.
Quindi abbiamo fatto una scannerizzazione di 3D di ogni pezzo e anche di tutto il deposito per cercare di fare in modo che se un pezzo fosse stato spostato si potesse sempre ritrovare. E ogni pezzo è stato scannerizzato in questo modo, come potete vedere.
So as you can see, we used a 3D scanner to scan each piece that were in the depot, and so that if any piece was moved, we could find exactly where it came from, each piece, as you can see in this picture.
I pezzi più grandi, che erano i pezzi, diciamo, dei soffitti dipinti soprattutto, sono stati messi nel piano terra di questo hangar che aveva 2 piani e sono stati sistemati, come vedete, con dei portici che li sostenevano per poterci lavorare.
Larger pieces, as you can see, were mainly painted ceilings. We placed them on the ground floor of the hangar, which was made up of 2 floors. So on the ground floor, we had these ceilings that were held up by scaffolding, as you can see in the picture.
Questa prima fase è durata diversi mesi, una fase di catalogazione e di studio di ogni pezzo, ed è stata seguita poi dal restauro di ogni pezzo.
So this first phase, in these first months, were characterized by a cataloging of all the pieces, and then we moved on to the restoration of the pieces.
Non abbiamo tempo qui di descrivere ogni operazione perché i pezzi erano appunto centinaia e il restauro è stato molto lungo, è durato circa 4 anni, ma qui vediamo il piano di diciamo separazione di uno dei soffitti, il soffitto di Duramont, che era la camera da letto e che vedete che è stato diviso in 7 pezzi per poterlo tirare giù dal soffitto.
Don't have enough time to talk to you about all the 100 pieces that we had, but the restoration, I can tell you, lasted 4 years. Here we see a picture of the various parts of a ceiling of a bed chamber. There were 7 pieces, to be exact, that were taken off from the ceiling.
Vedete che i tagli non sono regolari, hanno probabilmente seguito delle fessure che già erano del soffitto per tagliarli il meglio possibile.
As you can see, the pieces are not regular shape. They're all different shapes that probably had to do with the cracks in the ceiling themselves. So we tried to take them off carefully.
Alcuni di questi pezzi erano stati ricostruiti, qui li vediamo prima dello spostamento nel deposito di Agnières, erano stati ricostruiti in maniera sommaria, come vediamo qui.
Initially, as you can see, during the transfer and the rebuilding of the pieces, they were kind of put together haphazardly.
Abbiamo quindi cominciato al restauro di ogni pezzo singolo senza cercare nella prima fase di assemblarli di nuovo.
So we started at this point with the restoration of each piece before even attempting the reassembly.
La prima fase è stata quella di fare uno studio con delle immagini scientifiche. Vedete qui una riflettografia infrarosso, che è un sistema per vedere il disegno preparatorio.
As you can see, in our first phase, we carried out a certain analysis of scientific images, of infrared images, that can show us the preparatory phase of the picture itself.
E abbiamo fatto delle scoperte molto interessanti. Vedete che per esempio questi angeli che sono qui sono stati fatti con lo stesso cartone di questi. ma non sono nella versione definitiva, sono stati soppressi poi, spostati dall'artista.
So we made very interesting discoveries. As you can see here in the picture, these angels that I was highlighting have moved or made of the same material of these other of this other drawing, and we realized that the original artist moved the angel's position from that to another.
Questo esame è stato fatto ovviamente su tutte le parti dipinte e è stato molto importante perché abbiamo scoperto delle cose molto interessanti degli artisti e dopo di questo è stata cominciata la fase di pulitura.
This process was done with all of the pieces that were painted. They all had very interesting characteristics, and we discovered very interesting things about the original artists. And then we moved on to the cleaning of the pieces.
E vedete qui i primi test di pulitura come cambiano i colori per poi diventare così.
As you can see from an initial cleaning, how the colors change from one moment to the next.
E vedete che tutti i bordi non sono stati trattati perché il soffitto non è stato ancora assemblato, per cui era inutile trattare i bordi prima di assemblare tutti i pezzi.
And as you can see, the borders have these raw edges. They hadn't been restored because we waited to put them together on the ceiling and reassemble them before restoring.
Questo è stato quindi fatto su ogni pezzo singolarmente,
And this was done on each individual piece.
che sono stati dapprima puliti e poi abbiamo reintegrato le lacune.
They were first cleaned and then reassembled.
Questo per tutti i soffitti. Questo è il soffitto è lo schema per la distruzione della sala da pranzo.
Okay. And this was done for all of the ceilings. This instead is a graphic of the dining room.
Vedete come è stato preciso lo schema per deporli, questi pezzi, come è stata studiata tutta la struttura per cercare di non rovinare le pitture.
So as you can see, the sketch of the design of the hall was very meticulous because they didn't want to ruin the structure or the paintings that were on the walls.
Su questo soffitto la difficoltà maggiore era di non tagliare questo ovale, che conteneva la pittura prima di Fragonard e poi di Lagrené.
So the important thing was not to destroy what you see here, the medallion in the middle on the ceiling, because this medallion held important paintings, first of Fragonard and then
Lagrené.
Lagrené.
E quindi hanno fatto questa specie di sandwich per mantenere l'ovale che è qui dentro in questa cassa durante la distruzione.
So they made a sort of sandwich of materials to keep the oval, the medallion, intact in between.
E sono riusciti appunto a deporlo in un sol pezzo e qui vedete il pezzo che era stato ancora messo su 4 pilastri ad Agnières per poterlo guardare con i test di pulitura che sono stati fatti da noi.
So as you can see, we have the medallion, the painting, and the oval. It's all one piece resting on 4 pillars, and we can see the initial cleaning of the head of the angel there.
È stato smontato e poi l'abbiamo sospeso a questo portico.
It was dismantled, and then we held it up thanks to this sort of scaffolding.
Questa è stata la protezione che abbiamo messo per farlo viaggiare.
We protected it with this film.
Quello che è importante è vedere il dietro perché vedete per tenerlo insieme l'hanno circondato di un anello di metallo.
Mm-hmm. So they kept it together. This is the back of the painting, and they managed to keep it together with an iron ring.
Fermato questo cerchio da delle traverse di metallo.
And then we have these planks also made of metal.
Quindi hanno tagliato tutta la struttura con tutte le travi che portavano il soffitto.
So they took off everything from the ceiling, all of these pieces, all of this structure here that was holding the medallion
Questo
in
è il
place.
pezzo che pesava di più di tutti i pezzi della Chancellerie.
This is the piece that weighed the most out of all the pieces we found for the Chancellerie.
Nello spostamento hanno rotto diverse catene di sostegno per trasportarlo perché era talmente pesante, perché tutto questo di metallo appesantisce molto la struttura.
So during the transfer, many support chains were broken. several times because the piece was so heavy.
Anche su questo abbiamo fatto gli stessi studi che sul precedente
We carried out the same studies as we did with the other paintings,
e abbiamo scoperto una cosa molto interessante.
and we discovered something very interesting.
Questo dipinto era stato commissionato a Fragonard
This painting was commissioned to Fragonard,
e Fragonard l'ha eseguito,
and Fragonard completed it,
ma non è piaciuto al proprietario
but the owner did not like it.
e quindi l'hanno sostituito con un'altra pittura di Lagrené.
So they replaced it with another painting by Lagrené.
Ma facendo la riflettografia abbiamo scoperto questa cornice dipinta, decorata, che era molto probabilmente della prima versione di Fragonard.
So after our scientific infrared studies, we saw that the original frame, we came to the original frame that must have belonged to the original painting by Fragonard.
Ed ecco il dipinto durante la pulitura, vedete la differenza che c'è tra la parte sporca e pulita?
You could see the difference between the clean part and the older, part with residue.
E come dopo
of
il
the painting.
restauro si recupera questa policromia tipicamente XVIII secolo.
And how we recouped the actual colors of paintings of the 18th century.
Ma ognuno di questi soffitti era accompagnato anche dalle decorazioni stucco molto complesse e molto raffinate.
So, but you can see that the paintings also came with a number of decorations made in stucco that are very complex and very beautiful.
E questi stucchi erano stati ridipinti tante volte.
And these stucco pieces had been painted on several times.
Sono state condotte tantissime analisi stratigrafiche
We did this and we discovered this through a number of analyses
per capire la cromia originale,
to get to the bottom of it, to understand what the actual color was,
che finalmente è stata questo il risultato.
which the final result is this.
Ultimo soffitto, il più importante, quello del Gran Salone.
The last and most important ceiling is that of the Grand Salon.
Lo vediamo qui ancora Danier, era stato anche lui ricostruito.
We have another Raffiniere scaffolding that was rebuilt.
Abbiamo quindi dovuto di nuovo metterlo in pezzi, separare i pezzi.
We had to separate this in pieces.
E anche loro sono stati sospesi a questi portici che sono stati costruiti appositamente.
And they were hanging each from these, I would say, pulleys, as you can see in the scaffolding, to work on.
Anche questo è stato fatto, vedete la pulitura, in che modo recupera la policromia.
Here we see again how the colors have been recouped after cleaning.
E vi mostro solo due esempi rapidamente del prima e il dopo.
And I'll give you just two examples of the before and afters.
E abbiamo restaurato sempre tutti i pezzi senza assemblarli.
We always restored first before reassembling.
E con questi anche gli stucchi, vedete il prima
Here's the before,
e il dopo.
and this is the after of the stuccos.
Abbiamo anche trovato sui paramenti lignei che erano stati conservati e che avevano questo aspetto, quindi una pittura grigia.
We also saw linear panels with gray painting,
Un complesso decoro dorato, che era quello originale,
a gilded sort of artistic decorative complex.
e quindi è stata intrapresa la pulitura di tutta questa pittura che era recente.
So we cleaned all of these panels.
E abbiamo
Recently.
trovato su altre porte questo finto legno e queste pitture di Monnoyer bellissime.
And we saw and we discovered through the cleaning all of this fake wood on the panels and the Lemonnier.
E queste sono le
Images.
porte prima e dopo.
And this is the before, and on the right is the after.
Abbiamo quindi per il Gran Salon ricostruito durante il restauro
During the restoration of the Grand Salon,
per vedere se c'erano tutti i pezzi per completare la boiserie.
we rebuilt the room to see if we had all of the pieces for the boiserie.
Una volta tutte queste cose restaurate, abbiamo intrapreso il montaggio.
Once everything was restored, we started the reassembly.
È stato molto complesso anche perché il palazzo dove l'abbiamo messi appunto doveva essere modificato.
It was pretty complex because we had to place them in a very difficult building, let's say.
Abbiamo quindi modellizzato in 3D tutti i pezzi,
So we made a 3D model of all of the pieces,
anche per cercare di capirne il peso, visto che dovevamo mettere una scatola di sostegno nel palazzo.
Also to understand what the weight would be, because we had to put a certain type of foundation at the base of the building.
E dopodiché abbiamo studiato un sistema per mettere in cassa tutti questi pezzi
And we tried to find a system to put all these pieces in the various boxes, crates that you see here,
che erano dopo il restauro molto delicati
that were very delicate after they were restored, obviously.
e abbiamo concepito delle strutture di sostegno e di montaggio
And,
per montare tutti questi parti della decorazione.
right. So we created an actual system to support and reassemble all of the pieces that we had.
Questa è la struttura di montaggio e di sostegno del Grand Salon e questa della camera da letto, che sono legate insieme.
This is for the support and mounting of the Grand Salon on the right and on the left for the bedroom.
E questa è la struttura del Grand Salon che adesso vedrete in opera.
And this is what you will see.
Questo è lo studio che ha fatto un ingegnere bravissimo, noi lo chiamiamo il genio.
This was done by a brilliant engineer that we call the genius.
Si chiama Pierluigi Bucci, è italiano.
His name is Pierluigi Bucci and he's Italian.
È uno specialista della struttura dei palazzi storici.
He is a specialist in the structure of historical buildings.
E ha studiato un sistema per far entrare ogni pezzo, montarlo sulla struttura, sapendo che, vedete, la struttura entrava appena nella stanza, non potevamo quindi lavorare intorno.
And he studied a system to allow each piece to be mounted specifically on that structure vertically and linearly, because there was no way to work in the room.
In pratica non avevamo spazio per lavorare, quindi ogni pezzo doveva essere montato per essere montato in maniera definitiva.
So each piece had to be mounted definitively and directly through this passage, verticale, no? In verticale,
Sì.
in this vertical
Questa è una
passage.
piattaforma che sale e scende.
It's a platform that goes up and down.
Il pezzo entra, viene liberato dalla cassa e poi sale.
The piece is lifted from the crate and then it goes and it's applied in the reassembly.
Un'altra enorme difficoltà è stata far entrare questi camion nel Marais.
Another enormous difficulty that we faced is to have these trucks move in the Marais district.
Abbiamo dovuto controllare il peso del camion con i pezzi e che le strade lo sopportassero.
We had to check the weight, not only of the pieces, but also of the trucks, so that the streets could actually carry all this weight.
E alcuni pezzi che erano troppo grandi non potevano entrare dalle finestre, li abbiamo fatti entrare con una gru.
Yeah, and some of the pieces were so large that they could not go through the windows. We had to bring them in with a crane.
Questa è la stanza dove abbiamo messo il Grand Salon.
This is the room where we placed the Grand Salon.
Vedete, erano come delle scatole.
As you can see, they were like boxes.
E le tre stanze erano una attaccata all'altra.
And the three rooms were adjacent to each other.
Quindi abbiamo dovuto montarle una dopo l'altra.
So we had to mount them one after the other.
Il solo accesso è stato questo.
This was the only access that we had to the building.
Vi faccio quindi adesso vedere in time lapse il
will
montaggio del salone.
I'll show you a time lapse of the mounting of the Grand Salon.
Vedete che la cassa entra, viene liberata dalle pareti.
The crate enters the building.
La piattaforma sale.
The platform is lifted.
Il pezzo viene posizionato.
The piece is positioned.
Questi sono dei carrelli che l'ingegnere ha concepito per spostare i pezzi.
These are structures that the engineer he invented just to move the pieces around.
Viene messo su questo cornicione, i pezzi sono messi qui.
It's placed on that platform there.
L'ordine di entrata dei pezzi è stato visto per lasciare in ultimo il pezzo centrale.
We made it so that each piece entered, leaving the last piece, the central medallion.
E poi è stata posizionata c'ho uno sbaglio è stata posizionata e vedete che per posizionare bene i bordi abbiamo dovuto lavorare sul soffitto.
So to position the borders appropriately, we had to work from the ceiling,
mettendo delle assi sopra la cupola
putting some planks on top of the cupola.
e questo è il risultato.
This is the result.
Dopodiché abbiamo chiuso tutti i bordi.
And there we closed up all of the borders.
Stessa cosa è stata fatta per la sala da pranzo
Same thing happened here in the dining room.
e questo è il risultato.
And this is the final result.
E stessa cosa è stata fatta per il Duramont.
Same thing for the Duramont.
Poi abbiamo, una volta sistemati i soffitti, operato sulle pareti.
Once we finished with the ceilings, we started on with the panels.
Sulle pareti ci sono le parti originali che vedete qui.
We have original parts, as you can see here.
E le parti che non sono state conservate, che sono quelle in bianco.
And the parts that were not preserved that you see in white.
Per fortuna le parti non conservate avevamo dei calchi, per cui abbiamo potuto riprodurle.
So luckily enough, we had some calcs that we could reproduce to ornate, to decorate the parts that were
Vedete
not
questo prima e dopo?
preserved. This is the before.
Questa è una riproduzione perché questo medaglione è stato perso.
This is a reproduction because the original medallion was lost.
E vedete che qui abbiamo le ghirlande che sono originali sulla cornice che è stata rifatta.
So those the garland that you see here is original, that frames the painting. It's an original.
Faccio vedere, diciamo, una parte delle finestre che Benedicte non ha mostrato, queste bellissime tende di prella di cui vi ha già parlato. Questa è stato senz'altro la parte finale, la parte più glamour.
This is the final part that I'd like to talk about the windows, the window treatments. It's the more glamorous part of our restoration.
Bisogna dire che per il montaggio abbiamo avuto solamente 6 mesi, che è un tempo molto corto.
So for the total mounting, we only had 6 months' time, which is very short for this type of work.
Ma è stato preparato in maniera veramente molto dettagliata proprio per evitare di trovarsi in un planning troppo stretto.
But everything was prepared very well and meticulously, so we would avoid wasting time and duplicating our work.
Vi mostro rapidamente le altre immagini. Questo è il Gran Salone.
This is the Grand Salon.
Questo anche il Gran Salone, la sala da pranzo.
This is the dining room.
Questa è anche la sala da pranzo, vedete le sfingi che sono state rimontate sul cornicione.
This is also the dining room with the sphinxes that were reassembled.
E con questo vi ringrazio di avermi ascoltato e soprattutto ringrazio il Word per questa magnifica operazione.
And with this, I'd like to thank you for having me, for your attention, and especially the World Monuments Fund for doing this in the first place.
Okay, so thank you so much, Cinzia, because I mean, today, if you go and visit the Chancellerie d'Orléans, of course, you're going to see a magnificent space, but you cannot imagine without this presentation the amount of work that went behind it, because that showed you like the technicity, expertise, but also risk-taking approach. They had to. So it's really incredible, and I think I can say that because I have no responsibility. It really also shows like the ambition of our Monuments Fund, because like we want to safeguard the irreplaceable because of certain of our values, like a sense of wonder. That's one of the most important and incredible interior of the 18th century. That's why we did that. But also a can-do attitude. That's another of our value. And when you see that, you're right. I think without everybody at the World Monuments Fund at that time who had the ambition and really the courage to do this, it would have never happened because, first of all, everybody fighting in Paris about that.
Exactly.
But also you had to be a bit crazy to start this project because it was so long. You have to realize like this started in 2000 and it was inaugurated in 2021. So almost 100 years after it was demolished. It was demolished in 1923 and reopened to the public in 2021. And I'm not even talking about COVID. And I think we postponed the inauguration like 3 times.
We work
throughout COVID.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So tell me, Cinzia, was it worth it? Why did we do all of that? You've worked on many interiors. Why do you think this was extraordinary? This
Allora,
is.
parlo in italiano così Angela magari mi traduce. Io penso che di straordinario c'è sicuramente che la maniacaggine con quale lo hanno distrutto ci ha permesso di conservare un insieme completamente integro e di insiemi integri di più saloni, uno attaccato all'altro, con tutti i pezzi originali del XVIII secolo, non ce ne sono.
The why is, I feel, the reason why I did this and I feel it was extraordinary is because of the obsessiveness with which the pieces were maintained, were dismantled and stored to allow us to have pieces that were completely intact for 3 different salons. And so this is representing all of the pieces of this work of the 18th century. I find that extremely extraordinary.
And you don't have other examples like that?
No, non così grande e non così completo. Devo dire che la prima volta che mi hanno detto che nelle casse c'erano tutti i pezzi, non ci ho creduto.
No, not this large a project and not as complex. And I have to tell you, when they opened the crates and they told me they found all the pieces, I didn't believe them.
Yeah, and just to illustrate this, like if you go to l'Arsenal, and for example, the Salon Musique is a pretty small room
Yeah,
and
one
isolated.
room,
It's just
one
one
room,
room,
yes.
and it around it, the other rooms have nothing to do with it. So this, you feel you really penetrate an ensemble of the 18th century that you don't find elsewhere. So another thing is that in preservation, you always have to make sacrifices, right? And so the magic here and the miracle was to find this place that had almost the same dimensions. So one compromise that I was evoking at the beginning was the order of the room. So basically you end with the antechamber. So that was one of the compromise. But were there other things that you were obliged like to sacrifice?
Allora, non è stato veramente un sacrificio perché in realtà le due stanze che sono diventate una, l'anticamera e il vestibolo, sono diventate una anche perché avevano delle decorazioni molto semplici e non tutte erano state conservate. Quindi diciamo abbiamo fatto una sintesi, ma è una sintesi che già avevano fatto nella distruzione.
No, I don't feel like I had to make many sacrifices on this project, especially when we talk about the 2 rooms, the antechamber and the vestibule. They were found to have simple decorations because of destruction, so not all was saved. And so we combined the 2 rooms with the decorations, and it worked out fine.
Diciamo che più di un sacrificio abbiamo fatto un compromesso.
More than a sacrifice, it was a compromise.
Excellent. And there was also a story, like, so there was the floor that you had to dig, but there was also something with the windows, right? That it didn't fit perfectly.
Allora, non sono, le finestre non sono perfettamente in asse, quindi abbiamo fatto un po' un escamotage, ne abbiamo centrata quella centrale del Gran Salone e quella a destra e a sinistra sono leggermente spostate, ma il pubblico non se ne accorge.
Yes, we did something with the windows. We weren't allowed. I mean, it was impossible for us to install them perfectly centered. So we did have the central window that was centered, but the left and the right windows are kind of shifted.
But frankly, when you visit it, you cannot notice it at all. And so that's a testament to the brio and talent of your whole team. Also, I would say the commitment of our partners, like the Banque de France. I'm still amazed because, frankly, you make a promise in 1923. But le gouverneur, like the head of the Banque de France, really wanted to keep his promise. And so I think out of a budget of 20 million, they paid like 17. So it's really impressive that the Banque de France wanted to keep their word. And also the passion of our colleagues at the Ministry of Culture, that despite, because we are sparing you many episodes here, but they all were so passionate. And for me, it was so impressive the day of the opening to see like 700 people in the big courtyard of the archives, all gathered here because it was really an event in Paris. People wanted to see that place because it was the sleeping beauty of the 18th century interiors in France. On that, I will ask you if you have questions.
So raise your hand if you have any questions. Oh, right here. Thank you.
How was it that the Germans didn't make off with these crates? Come mai I tedeschi non se hanno portato via le casse?
Allora, prima di tutto era in un hangar fuori Parigi e diciamo le casse erano veramente non invitanti, non so come dire.
First of all, the crates were in a hangar outside of Paris, and the crates didn't look like they had nothing much in them. They
E
weren't
poi
very
bisogna
attractive to
dire
thieves.
che il fatto che stavano in pezzi, secondo me non si sono neanche interessati a una cosa che non era già intera.
They didn't think, because there were separate crates with all these different pieces, they didn't think of an unicum, that there was this big work of art that was part of one whole thing.
E tanto meglio perché non avrebbero saputo dove metterla.
Which is even better because they wouldn't know where to put it. They wouldn't have known where to put it.
Yes. What was the total cost of this project?
So the total cost was around 20 million euros. And once again, 20
million.
And once again, it was mainly covered by the Banque de France, because when they demolished the previous Chancellerie d'Orléans, what was the original, now it's à l'Hôtel de Rouen, they made that commitment that they were given the approval for demolishing that landmark building, but against that promise, and they kept it, which is extraordinary. And then I have to say that 3 million euros came from World Monuments Fund, very, very generous donors.
The first 3 million.
Yeah, and so including Bernard Selz, who is also naming this lecture. I had lunch with him today. I was like, Bernard, where are you? And but he knows the project really, really well. And also the Wilson Trust and I think the Crest Foundation, who sponsored the model. The model was really important because it allowed people to imagine. You know, now, of course, it's easy. You go there, you can see it. But at that time, it was like pieces in crates. And so we created a 3D experience that I think was shown here at the consulate. We created a 3D model, like this model to show people. And all those were elements really important to make people believe in the project.
You mentioned there was, in the oval ceiling, Fragonard had originally painted it, and the original owner didn't like it and had someone else redo it. Does the Fragonard medallion survive?
No, no, diciamo che abbiamo sempre sperato che ricomparisse da qualche parte, perché a un certo punto abbiamo pensato che era stata dipinta su una tela incollata sul medaglione, perché abbiamo trovato dei chiodi, delle chiodature.
We actually hoped that we could find it, that it would pop up somewhere. We actually suspected, but never found it, that it was painted on a canvas that was nailed to the back of the medallion, because we found nails, but we never found the painting.
And I
Chissà,
think
forse un giorno, maybe one day.
And I think among all those extraordinary ceilings, what's important to say is that the only one that was not part of the second redesign of the Chancellerie d'Orléans was the ceiling by Coipel, because that was really from the original building and from the time of Durameau when he built it, and that was kept by Charles de Vailly. Also, you have many pieces I understand that are completely unique, like the Sphinx. We saw them by Pajou. They were, in fact, I think they were at le Louvre, no? Or voilà. So some pieces during all that time, all these decors were in the crates. Some pieces were in fact exhibited at the Louvre because they were that important. And so the Louvre, then it was a part of the many episode, the negotiation with the Louvre to get it back, because when the Louvre has something, they don't really want to give it back. And so, yeah. Exactly.
Pass this down. We have a question right here.
Thank you so much for the presentation. What an amazing project. Could you give us a sense of how long each stage took, the documentation, the restoration, and the assembly?
All right, 10 years altogether. The first years for analysis. First 2 years, sorry. First 2 years. 3 of restoration. 6 months for reassembly.
Il resto per, diciamo, degli incroci amministrativi.
The rest because of red tape, let's say.
No, because the story is that it took between 2000 and 2021, but normally it should have taken 8 years, like you said. But, you know, between the time of convincing everybody, finding fundraising, and then fighting everybody to get the pieces back, to Louvre, everything, and then COVID. So that's why it took much, much longer than it should have taken. If you have everything assembled and everything is easy, I think would be a 5 to 8 years project, right? And but because of all those other components, took longer.
Is it known or possible that there are other projects like this out there in France or Paris? No.
No, penso che una cosa così grande, con tante implicazioni, tanti saloni, una cosa così complicata da ricostruire, io non ne conosco di altri progetti simili.
No.
Sorry. I don't know, something so large, a project this large with so many implications, so many rooms, salons, so complex to rebuild. I don't know of any other in the world right now.
No, that's completely unique. At the same time, me, I'm always surprised by what we find all over the world, you know. And what I was talking about before about La Sorbonne, it's completely different. It's not magnificent decors of the 18th century in the same way, but still it's a very iconic place. And I couldn't believe that right in the heart of Paris, you have a place like that closed for 50 years. So I have to say, like among the projects of our Monuments Fund, you have so many treasures. Just now in September, we inaugurated the Qinglong Garden, which is a series of courtyards at the Palace Museum, the Forbidden City in Beijing. That's another, in a completely different way, extraordinary place, and I invite you to check it out, and we can do another talk about that. But you know, you have in the world like so many treasures. Humanity has been quite creative, and that's why we're here. I think it will be the last question. From
Well,
what I
thank you so much for a fascinating presentation. I've had the good fortune to have visited it shortly after the opening, so it was very nice now in hindsight to hear this. What I would love to know now, a few years after this, the completion of this amazing project, what is for you the most important thing that you have learned that will help you work on future projects?
Allora, io penso che nel restauro ogni cosa che il restauratore fa, ogni opera, è un'acquisizione di conoscenze per quella dopo. Senz'altro sul progetto così la cosa più complessa è stata gestire non l'opera ma le persone. Diciamo che sono stata molto aiutata dalla mia esperienza di restauro su Leonardo da Vinci, dove anche il problema è stato gestire le persone. più che l'opera. L'opera tecnicamente è sempre più facile che gli esseri umani.
So in restoration, a restorer for each work acquires a certain amount of skills and knowledge for the next work, the next project that they undertake. For me, because of the complexity of this project, it was more learning about not so much how to manage the work, but how to manage people. Because before, when I worked on my Da Vinci project, there was a lot of pressure and characters and people were very difficult to manage. So that was more important, even so, than working on the technical part of the work. Technicality is not a problem. People are more of a problem.
And with that, I will bring us to a close. Please join me in thanking our speakers.